Good afternoon, everybody, and a very warm welcome to you. Thank you very much for taking the time this afternoon to attend the Digital Educator Awards Scotland Peer Reviewer and Validator training. Just in case you didn't know, this session ran on Monday, so if you did attend the Monday session, this is exactly the same. So you can step out if you think this was something different. So we ran this session on Monday, and this is a repeat of the same session on Wednesday, but you only need to attend one date of it. So I make it 1 minute past 4, so we'll make a start straight away so that I'm not keeping you hanging on longer than necessary. Today's session, I am going to talk through the role of the peer reviewer and the validator, and just talk you through the process on the portal when it comes to the time when you are carrying out a peer review or a validator for an applicant. The first step is to register for an account on the portal, so portal.digitaleducatораwards.com/register. If you already have an account on the Digital Schools Award website, then there's no need for you to register twice. You'll be able to log in and use exactly the same login details as you do on Digital School Awards, as you do on the Digital Educator Awards portal. So we encourage you that after this session or during this session, get on the website, onto that portal and get registered. That's the first step that you need to do. If you are not registered, then the applicant can't add you as a peer reviewer and send you an invite, and the same as a validator. So we really want you to register quite soon, so that any applicants who have you as their peer reviewer or validator can then invite you and add you from their side on their portal application. The next step, step 2, is for you to understand the role and the time required. And there is a checklist that you can download from the digitaleducatораwards.com website. When you visit the Digital Educator Awards website, you'll see a menu, and there's a link to resources, useful resources. There's also links to various training webinars and other resources around the Intel Skills for Innovation program as well. So worth having a dip into that and exploring. So we encourage you to download the checklist so that you can read a bit more about your role and see the timeline between now and May, when the applications will be peer reviewed and validated. Just to give you a sort of summary of what the peer reviewer role is about. As a peer reviewer, you are there to support a colleague, or perhaps more than one colleague. You might be supporting a few people in your school in applying for the award. And you're there to provide objective and informed and constructive feedback on their submission. Peer reviewers, you may be working in the same school, or you might be part of a professional network or a cluster, or a local authority. So you might be in the same school as the applicant, but you might be somewhere else. And the peer reviewer process is really based on professional dialogue. It's just an opportunity to perhaps have a cuppa and catch up with the applicant and just talk about and reflect on their use of digital technology, perhaps ask them about how they're progressing with the application, talking about their evidence, and how they are using technology to support pedagogy. And the process of peer reviewing is really about being collaborative and developmental. So the peer reviewer, it's anticipated that you will work with your applicant. And this is informal, it's just light touch, and it's for you to agree with the applicant how often you might meet to do that. But it's anticipated that perhaps you'll have a couple of 2 or 3 conversations between now and the deadline of the application, which is the 30th of April. And we encourage you to sort of have a peer-to-peer catch-up, and you're there just as a kind of critical friend to give them some support. Your focus as a peer reviewer is to look at authenticity and relevance, making sure that the evidence is appropriate for the applicant's role and aligned with the school priorities and digital development. So we encourage you to create a space for those professional conversations about digital learning and teaching to take place between the applicant and the peer reviewer. And we have suggested sort of perhaps an hour in total, so perhaps a few 10-minute chats or perhaps two or three 20-minute chats. But as I say, light touch, perhaps over a cuppa or perhaps incorporated into perhaps another meeting that you might have, or you work out what works best for you, or it might be a chat over lunchtime. So we're not really stipulating, but as a guide we're saying up to an hour across the time that the applicant's working on their application. And it's for you to understand the applicant's role and digital practice, and sort of view the submission through a strategic lens, providing a different perspective and providing a supportive role. It's definitely not a performance appraisal. It's really a peer-to-peer conversation and support. So some top tips for you if you're a peer reviewer. As I say, you're there to support your colleague, and we encourage that early dialogue, focused evidence review, and providing constructive and strategic feedback and clear, concise comments that prioritise authenticity, impact and professional growth. If ever you're unsure, bring it back to the core question: does this evidence genuinely represent the applicant's role, impact, and digital practice? So we're encouraging you to get involved in these light touch conversations in the lead up to the application being submitted. But these tips are also relevant not just in the lead up to the application being submitted, but also when you're actually carrying out the peer review as well. But if you are involved along the way, then your peer review time might be shortened because you're already familiar with the evidence on the application. So we encourage you to start early if you can and set expectations. Meet at the beginning of the process so that you both can understand the chosen pathway and evidence planned, and agree how you'll check in and the level of the support that the applicant wants. It might be that the applicant's completely fine and confident and perhaps just wants to check in with you just before they submit. So have a conversation and see what works best. As a peer reviewer, we really want you to be looking for high quality evidence over quantity. So think evidence quality, think impact, and that so what question. So what changed for learners, or what changed for colleagues, what changed for the school? And this helps you to provide meaningful comments about value and impact. We want you to be constructive but not critical. You might suggest strengths, but also suggestions as well. So frame it in that way where you're highlighting a strength and then providing an area that they might be able to improve in. And just as a peer reviewer, to check that they are upholding digital ethics and policy alignment, that they're maintaining to support children to be safe online, ethical use of artificial intelligence, that kind of thing. And looking at how the evidence supports the school priorities as well. So overall, it's light touch but structured and encourage reflection. So think about the relevance of the evidence. Think about how the evidence supports goals or priorities, both for the individual and for the school. Look at strengths and impact, and any standout innovation and perhaps helpful next steps. You might want to suggest those, or it might be that the applicant has suggested next steps as well. In the lead up to the application being submitted, there are a number of writing retreats that are being held to encourage applicants to work on their application. And by booking on the writing retreats, they equate to the time it roughly would take to complete an application. So it's really to support applicants in blocking out that time. So as a peer reviewer, you might want to encourage applicants to book on the writing retreats. At the last one, at each one, we tend to sort of share handy tips and tricks. And at the last writing retreat, last week, I think it was, we talked about the STAR framework. and how that can be useful for applicants to work on evidence. So thinking about a specific situation, explaining the task and their responsibility, taking action, so describing how they've accomplished the task, and then the result. So what happened, and where next, how to take that forward and how to improve it. As a peer reviewer, you might be peer reviewing a number of different awards across applicants, and applicants may be applying for more than one award as well. So I just wanted to sort of give you a really high level overview of the differences between the three awards and the types of evidence that you're looking for as a peer reviewer. So the Digital Educator Award, the main focus is about individual practice, learner impact in the classroom. So it's about the individual being able to influence and develop digital skills within the classroom, so classroom focused. And the evidence that we're looking for is really high quality examples of teaching, digital schools, perhaps looking at digital safety and cyber resilience, collaboration and reflection. And we really don't expect lots of evidence. We've capped it as a maximum of 5 pieces of evidence per criteria within the award, but it might be less. So, really encourage your applicants to focus on being succinct and really picking out the best evidence possible, and that it's not about collating loads and loads of evidence and doing lots of work. We don't want it to be onerous. We really want you to look at we want the applicant to look at the criteria and really pick out some specific evidence to support them in presenting evidence on how they are achieving that criteria. Moving on to the Digital Influencer Award, this is about influencing on colleagues and sustained collaboration. So the difference between the educator and the influencer is that the educator's focus is within the classroom. The influencer is stepping outside the classroom, and if you're a digital influencer, you are working across the school, perhaps training other teachers. You might be even working across a cluster as well and supporting other schools. So it's stepping out of that classroom and that wider collaboration and support in developing digital skills. So evidence might be showing how others have changed practice due to the applicant's support, looking at examples of joint work and impact reflections, and really looking at that impact, that wider impact across a school or across clusters of schools, and the impact across staff. And then the third award is the Digital Leader Award, and that's looking at strategic leadership and institutional change. So this person, the digital leader, is influencing policy and strategy, and actually is in a role where they can actually design and develop and implement. So it's at that different level again in comparison to the influencer and the educator. So types of evidence might be policies or CLPL leadership, strategic decisions that they've made about the whole school approach to digital in the school, system-wide digital improvement. So I'm just briefly going to go into a little bit more detail about each of the awards, just as a peer reviewer, what you'll be looking for. And if you're a validator attending today, this might just be useful information for you to listen to. So the Educator Award, this pathway is practice focused and it's centered on the applicant's own teaching and digital pedagogy, and it focuses on that individual in the classroom practice and day-to-day digital competence and supporting the development of digital skills within their classroom. So evidence should demonstrate breadth across the 5 competency areas for this award, which are core skills, CRIS, collaboration, awareness, and enhancing teaching. So the examples, we want them to be authentic, coming from the classroom. It's not about large scale impact. So the evidence types that you might be looking for as a peer reviewer are perhaps screenshots or lesson plans, learning artifacts that they've created, examples of learners' work, records of digital activities or tools used, examples of internet safety and cyber resilience, so things like supporting children in developing safe passwords, secure storage and device management. Examples of collaboration with learners or colleagues, reflections on practice and impact, so perhaps impact on learner voice or impact on engagement and attainment. And the applicant may submit evidence of Intel training that they've done as well, which is part of this programme. It's an optional part, Intel's Skills for Innovation programme, but they might have recognised a gap in terms of their knowledge. Perhaps they want to develop more knowledge in using artificial intelligence or keeping children safe online, for example, and they would look for a relevant course in that on Intel's programme, and then talk about how that course has impacted their practice. And as part of those courses, all the courses on Intel's programme are between 1 and 3 hours, and they're all very practical, hands-on, and the assessment for those courses is generally developing some kind of learning artifact or a lesson plan towards at the end of each course. So that's something that they can then take forward and implement into the classroom. So we're not, as the evidence, we're not just looking at a certificate of a course, we're wanting to see how that learning has been developed and implemented into their practice, and what the next steps might be. Looking at the Digital Influencer Award, as a peer reviewer, this pathway is focused on collaboration and leadership amongst peers and influencing across colleagues and across the school, and even maybe further afield across a cluster of schools. So it's looking at assessing how the applicant has influenced others, not just their own practice, but wider. It must check for sustained collaboration, not just one-off activities. And the emphasis is on how practice has spread across colleagues or teams or clusters or partner organisations, or perhaps with families in the home as well. Submissions must include a reflective account of how the collaboration started and challenges, outcomes and sustainability. So some examples of evidence that you might look for as a peer reviewer are examples of professional learning activities and training that's been delivered to colleagues, evidence showing others have implemented the applicant's ideas, co-created resources or sharing training materials and collaborative planning, records of cluster or cross-organisation work, examples of digital culture change. So, for example, new platforms or tools that have been adopted by staff. It might be the introduction of a tool across the school that's been used to support children with dyslexia, for example, some accessibility tools, and reflections on the impact on colleagues and organisational practice. So as the peer reviewer, you must verify that the influence is demonstrated and sustained and not just implied. And the Digital Leader Award, this is to recognise strategic level leadership and organisational digital transformation. So here we're examining strategic evidence rather than classroom level practice. It must consider whether the applicant has influenced policy, digital strategy, CLPL planning, procurement, whole school change or cross-organisational leadership. So they're the kind of things that we're looking at. And the evidence should reflect long-term systemic impact and alignment with sectorial policy. So types of evidence that you might look for is digital strategy or policy development for a school or across schools in a cluster, records of leading CLPL planning or evaluation and monitoring, evidence of cluster or regional or cross-institutional leadership, or it might be work that you've run to support the local authority and schools within that local authority, case studies demonstrating whole institutional digital development, examples showing impact on procurement, strategic decisions or institutional culture, and also looking at how technology is being used to support perhaps AI literacy or digital transformation, and how you are using technology to perhaps carry out quality reviews across the school. So perhaps things like how good is your school? As a peer reviewer, you should ensure that the submission shows strategic responsibility and not just operational activity. So step 3 is that once you are registered and the applicant adds you as a peer reviewer or a validator, you'll receive an email alert to notify you that you've been added. And then you'll receive an email alert as well when the applicant has actually submitted their application and it's ready to be peer reviewed. And as a validator, you'll get an email alert once the peer reviewer has carried out their peer review and submitted as well. And then it will then be passed on to the validator to validate. So step 4, once you've received that email alert as a peer reviewer, it's your turn to log into the portal. And from the left-hand menu, you'll see awards for my review. So you click on that. If you're a validator, then you would click on awards for my validation. And when you do that, you'll then see in the main dashboard area, as shown here on the slide, any applications that are ready to be peer reviewed or validated. And by the name of the person, you just click on view to then open up the application. And then step 5 is to then review the evidence. So you can work through, scroll down the page. It's quite long, so make sure that you are not missing any of the elements. And you will read at the top about the award and examples of evidence that the applicant might submit. And you'll see colour-coded boxes showing the resources that have been available to the applicant. So if they're coloured green, it means that they're resources that have been created by Digital Educator Awards Scotland. The amber ones are links to websites and policies and frameworks, useful links to various websites. And the blue ones are recommended Intel courses. And then you'll scroll down and you'll see here on the slide, you'll see the blue outline there with the arrow. And underneath the criteria for the award, there is then a text box and an area for the applicant to submit their evidence and type in text to talk about how they're meeting that criteria. So that's there for you to then peer review and access whatever's been uploaded. You can also work in progress. So there is a box underneath the applicant's evidence for you to then add your peer review notes and for you to comment. And be aware that everything that you type in that box is shared with the applicant. And if you are working in progress, there's a box called Save as Draft. So you can click on that if you're not quite ready to submit the peer review and you want to return to it, you can do. And you'll work through each of the sections of the criteria for the award, review what the applicant has said, review their evidence, and then add your peer review comments. So you will scroll down the page and add your comments after the evidence. And once you're ready, you will either click Save as Draft or click the blue button Approve Survey once you are fully finished. If you do find that you feel that the applicant hasn't quite met a criteria and you feel that they need to submit additional evidence or tweak something, then you can type in the peer reviewer text box your remarks and click the orange box instead, which is send feedback. So the application will then go back to the applicant and they'll be able to then make the amendments that you require. It might be that you feel that something's just not quite evidenced enough or that might have referred to something but then not attached it, for example. So there is that option. If you do feel that it needs to go back to the applicant, then you can. But if you are happy and you've reviewed all the evidence, you've worked through the criteria, you've added your comments, at that point you can click the blue button to approve the blue button is called Approve Survey, which is for you to approve the peer review and complete it. Once you've clicked that blue button, the application will disappear from your Awards for My Review page, and that is when the email is then triggered to the validator, and the application will then transfer to the validator's dashboard. So just as a reminder, as the peer reviewer, it's not your job to judge, it's not an appraisal review. It's about supporting and validating and elevating. So keep in mind about keeping your tone encouraging and collegial and forward looking. So as I said, after you clicked that blue button, then that will alert the validator and they'll receive an email. So now we are moving on to the validator's role. A validator provides the final institutional sign-off for a Digital Educator Awards Scotland submission, and it's the validator's role to confirm that the peer-reviewed application is authentic, complete, and aligned with the institution's ethos, priorities, and digital journey. And as a validator, you'll offer brief comments on the quality and legitimacy of the process rather than judging the applicant's performance. So, some top tips for you as a validator. You are there to provide a clear, high level confirmation that the submission is authentic and aligns with the school's priorities, that the application is being procedurally sound, it's the peer reviewer has offered support, there's objective observations while keeping the process efficient and compliant. So, as the validator, you're checking that it's 100% authentic and you are focusing on the process rather than the person. So you're checking that the application has been completed properly, peer review has happened and procedures were followed. It's not a performance appraisal. You're looking for the authenticity and that the submission reflects genuine practice and is consistent with institutional goals, digital strategy and ethos. So we encourage you to keep your comments concise and high level. You're validating the process, not critiquing the evidence in depth. A brief confirmation and any general observations are enough. So very light touch. We'd like you to consider impact, so just checking that the evidence is appropriate, that the peer reviewer was meaningful, that the peer review was meaningful. So have a check of their comments, and we're always acting to be ethical, so making sure that safeguarding and any data requirements were met. Where appropriate, reflect on whether the process contributed to professional learning or had a visible impact on learners or staff. As a validator, we want you to be objective and supportive, so offering comments that acknowledge strengths and encourage continued development without drifting into formal evaluation. So don't re-evaluate all the evidence. That was the role of the peer reviewer. Only verify the integrity of the process. And then similar to the peer reviewer, same process, you would click on the awards for my validation on the left-hand side. You will then see the applications that are ready for you to validate, and you click on view the link to the blue link on the right-hand side there to view the application. And then you'll validate the application. Similar process where you'll scroll down, look at the award criteria, you'll be able to see the resources that were available to the applicant, and then you'll be able to read what text they've written, what evidence they've submitted. You'll see the peer reviewer remarks, and then you'll be able to add your comments as well in the text box. So for each award, you will see any suggestions that the peer reviewer made, and you'll be able to see everything that the peer reviewer has seen. And then same process again, you can either save as draft if you're sort of doing it in progress, or you can give feedback back to the peer reviewer if you feel that this is not quite right to validate at this stage, and you can provide feedback. If you're happy with everything, then you can complete your comments and click the blue button to approve the survey. So again, your job, just like the peer reviewer, is not to your job is to support and validate and elevate that applicant and keeping the tone encouraging, collegial and forward looking. And just to let you know, one extra step after that is that after you've submitted your validation as a validator, the application will come to Digital Educator Awards Scotland, and we will then do a final check as well. So lots of checks in place to make sure that it's a really robust process. So that's everything that I wanted to cover today.